In this ClimateGenn episode, I'm speaking with Baroness Natalie Bennett about her book Change Everything. Natalie makes a fascinating case as to why the centre of politics can no longer deal with the critical challenges we collectively face. From the economic to the social and environmental, we are living in a moment of both energizing and frightening changes. In Change Everything, Natalie details her green philosophy to rethink, repair, and rebuild society. The next public episode will be with Claire Farrell, founder of XR, recorded a few weeks ago in Helsinki at the Atlas 25 conference. I will also be uploading a number of episodes to the members area this week relating to COP30, also a new film about how Putin's invasion of Ukraine is also an unconscionable attack on nature, and what that says about us more widely as a species. Thank you for listening and for all the feedback, and to all members who support this project. Natalie, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for taking the time to discuss your book, Change Everything. If we consider the themes of the book, and there's a few elements to all of this, there's universal basic income, there's free education, healthcare, and so on. Is now a time, do you think, to change everything? I mean, this is now a feasible time as opposed to maybe 10 years ago, for example.
Very much so, and I would say that Change Everything is an inevitability. Where we are now is profoundly unstable economically, environmentally, politically, educationally. That's the focus of the book is the UK, but that's true around the world. So the uncertainty of the next 5, 10 years is we're going to see enormous change. What we have to do is make sure that change is in the right kind of directions. And one of the things the book says, it's very much a call to action. It says that history is not pre-written. History is made by the actions of people. So as we go into COP30 in Brazil, for example, we don't know how it's going to come out at the end of it. We don't know where we'll be. Individual people will take action. And one of the other messages of the book is that, yes, history is not pre-written. It's made by the actions of people. You can make history. We want a world where everyone makes politics what they do not have done to them. And doing politics might be organising a litter pick. It might be running for election. It might be campaigning to change your school canteen and get less plastic in it. All of those things, people can get together, make history, and change the world in the right direction.
Okay, and you mentioned the COP. We'll come back to that in a bit. But on the side of people, and let's just take the UK as a good example, is that there are many people who will say yes to so many things in the book and it'll resonate with them of how society should be. But there's another side that have been kind of polarized against any kind of progressive thinking whatsoever. How do we deal with polarization there seems to be a great barrier to moving forward at the moment, to change?
Well, I think we have to be realistic about this in that there's two potential visions of the future at the moment. There's the green vision that understands there's enough resources on this planet for everyone to have a decent life, for us to look after climate and nature if we share them out fairly. And the far right vision of the Reform Party of Marine Le Pen in France and many other people around the world that says, oh, it's a difficult, dangerous world. We've got to grab what we can for us and ours and shove those others other way, build walls to keep them out. So those are the two visions, and there's two emotions attached to those. Ours is a hopeful vision. Yes, human beings are creative, innovative. We've been on this planet for 300,000 years as a species. We've survived lots of different things. We can work this through and get out the other side. The other side, the far right, is a message of fear. It's just, hunker down and try and survive, and it's all going to be terribly miserable. And I'm positive because I think hope is a more useful, more effective emotion than fear. But you can't expect everyone to come with us. What's very clear is the centre is dead, because centrist politics means leaving things much as they are now. If you're a centrist politician, you just want to twiddle the odd dial here, move the odd lever a little bit there, but not deliver real change. And you look at what's happening in politics around the world, people will not vote for status quo politicians who offer more of the same for good reason. And they also won't look to people who look backwards. I run into a lot of social democrat type people who go, well, it was all going so well in the 1990s, and now it's Russian bots and social media has led people astray. And no, what we have now is a product of the 1990s. We shouldn't even think of going back to that. It was a deeply unequal, deeply damaging to nature and climate world. We need to build something much, much better.
Yeah, and it's interesting that in the 1990s was when we had the real power to act on things like the environment, which would have averted many of the crises that we're committed to today in these respects. But
we didn't have the political space. And one of the things, I would say is, I joined the Green Party on the 1st of January 2006. And that was about when Gordon Brown was promising that he'd abolished boom and bust, and we were going to ride as a nation on the back of the financial sector into a golden future. Since then, of course, we've had the financial crash and we've had the COVID pandemic. So we now have a much more realistic view as a species on this planet, that we are operating within systems that are not within our control, that we have to work with nature. I talk a lot about in the book about agroecology, working with nature rather than trying to cosh it into submission. We know that we need to create much healthier environments for people. And one of the things that ties to is not burning fossil fuels, because that's really bad for people's health as well as bad for the climate and the natural environment. So all of these things, we've come to a point now where we're ready to take these things on that we just weren't ready to do in the 1990s. And I don't believe in perfect political cycles, but we had 40 years after the Second World War of a social democratic consensus. We've had 40 years of neoliberalism, which has been built on inequality, greed is good, we can keep trashing the planet. We're now in a situation to create the politics for the new age.
Your book really is about this green political philosophy that is trying to define what all of these new age, what does it tangibly look like, and what are the ideas? And yet, as you were just saying, we are up against this sort of cynicism and divisiveness of reform, which emotionally charges people, and in quite a bad way, but it does charge them up. Do you think that there's a way to overcome that with these ideas, with these visions for a future, if you like?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that I'm not primarily interested in walking up to the most committed reform voter, with a side serving of conspiracy theories, and in one conversation on the doorstep to turn them around. What I want to do is energize the vast majority of people who were totally not convinced by reform. And you look at the British public surveys show British public are totally unconvinced by Donald Trump, really do not like Donald Trump at all. If you look at the support for reform, there's also very, very strong resistance to reform. You look at some figures on young people, there's been a lot of talk about young people apparently, particularly young men apparently being attracted by reform, but you actually look at the statistics, it's a very, very, very much a minority. What the job is to do is to unite and present a positive vision, an energizing vision to the people who innately react against reform, the people who are totally not convinced by reform, but they're also, I'm afraid, totally not convinced by Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour government. And the key question is to make sure that the people who don't turn away and give up and say it's all hopeless, that's why I think hope as a mission is so important. The majority is on our side. We just have to make sure that they can see that they can, with their vote, with their decision to organise a litter pick, with their decision to set up a community garden, whatever it might be, whatever floats their boat, getting involved, getting engaged, not feeling like you just have to hunker down and try and survive. Optimism is really crucial.
And in the book, you do talk about how we got here in terms of things like colonialism, how the City of London, the financial sector plays an outsized power role. Do you think that Zach Polanski, as the new leader of the Green Party, is getting a lot of traction, but probably because of this sort of polarization? Is that something you feel that he could change if there was more presence after the next election? Do you think that there's room now for the Green Party to actually expand and be a powerhouse of ideas in government?
Absolutely. And I've always said that I'm preparing for the first Green government. And that's, people used to raise their eyebrows when I said that. People don't raise their eyebrows at that now. And I actually start hearing people saying it before I've said it myself. The future of politics doesn't look like the past. That's something I was saying since I was elected leader of the Green Party in 2012. And again, back then, it didn't look like, well, we've had Labour and Tory as the two largest parties in the UK for a century. There's nothing written in stone that says that's going to stay that way. And of course, now that very much looks like something that is likely to change very fast. We don't have an electoral system that delivers democracy. The UK is not a democracy. That's one of our underlying problems. You look back to the Brexit referendum, and what won that referendum for leave was the slogan "Take Back Control." That's because we don't have a democratic political system. But what we saw, for example, just in the by-election for the Senate in Wales, for example, in Caerphilly, voters are far more engaged, far more involved. Far fewer voters now are wedded to one party and say they're just going to vote for that party until they die. So people are going to make political decisions, are going to say, we want change. How's the best way to deliver that change? And that engagement and that involvement is going to deliver results unlike anything we've ever seen before.
You're talking about the lack of democracy in some quarters, and we'll use reform as an example. They seem to be implying that we need more authoritarian and less democracy. But there's an argument for more democracy. Can you give some ideas of how you would improve democracy in the UK?
Absolutely. Many people listening to this, I'm sure, will be aware of the arguments for a proportional representation election system. The not at all radical desire to have a parliament that reflects the views of the people. But that's just one element of this. One of the other key elements is that the UK is the most concentrated polity in Western Europe. Power, resources, and money are concentrated in Westminster in a way that looks absolutely shocking to people from the outside. And there's lots of talk from the government of devolution, which is what Westminster's deciding it's going to do to the rest of England. But those councils, whoever they are, will be spending nearly all of the money they have on the priorities decided by Westminster. Statutory priorities, things that obviously need doing, like social care, children's care, etc. But nonetheless, there is no local power in democracy. And so a fundamental principle of the Green Party is that power should be held locally, decisions made by the people affected, and only moved up when absolutely necessary. So we need a transformation of the British political system, the English political system in particular. But also what we're seeing is that from the grassroots upwards, lots of really exciting different forms of people's assemblies, deliberative democracy. The Guardian just ran a really fascinating report about a arts centre in Nottingham that's being run by a citizens' assembly. So what's happening is there is a real drive for that decision making. And that's a foundation of green political thought, is to listen to the people. This is the difference between eco-populism and right-wing populism. Right-wing populism is essentially, here's a man possibly sitting on a white horse, possibly in a military uniform. Don't worry your little head about this. Just walk after him and do what he tells you. Whereas we say, we want to listen to you. We want you to be empowered, to be engaged, to be making decisions for yourself and your community. This is something where everybody has an input. And that's one of the fundamental differences of the two sides of politics.
You talked about the budget side of it and how money is managed, and also these days how tight it is for so many people. Environmentally, everything gets pushed down the agenda because of these other issues. And in the book, you do mention several times about the consumption in the UK is very high in terms of how much we consume. It's about 3 planets worth. And historically, we have a huge burden of our contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, so on and so forth. How could we start to reduce emissions in the UK, increase climate resilience, climate security for the population in a way that doesn't hurt people, that actually marries the sort of progressive agenda on a social level?
It's worth laying it out to the start. Inequality is a huge climate issue. The people who consume most of the resources among the UK are the people who are getting very large incomes, often unearned incomes, and using that for high climate consumption. If you look around the world, as the book makes clear, Green parties sit in the same political space around the world, and there's a reason for that. It's a redistributive space, a word that I'm afraid our Labour government won't even use, the R word. We have to redistribute resources in our society. As you said, we've got 3 planet living. To get back to 1 planet living, you cannot say anything like, right, everyone cut back by 2/3. That literally leaves lots of people dead. People who are already skipping meals because they can't afford to buy them, or eating horrible unhealthy food because that's all they can afford, people who are switching off the heating in winter and shivering because they can't afford the bill. What you have to do is the people who have to give up a lot more are the people who are consuming the most, who are the wealthy, so rebalancing wealth across our society. This is true both for the UK and the globe. There's enough resources on this planet for everyone to have a decent life, for us to look after climate and nature if we share those resources out fairly. And the other thing to say about that is a book that's quite old now, but is always worth pointing to, The Spirit Level, which points out that actually even the wealthiest in society do better, have better health, better well-being in more equal societies. So this inequality is bad for the climate. It's bad for everybody in society, and it's not acceptable. And I was talking about democracy, a society where people don't have to fear putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their head. And that's why I think universal basic income, the first chapter of the book, Change Everything, is about universal basic income, because it's a fundamental transformation of giving people security. Everybody has enough without worry. And one of the big things about the book is we really have to change the idea. At the moment, we still have the largest political parties going, oh, we've got to create jobs. But we have a huge shortage of nurses and care workers and so many other roles. We have to turn this around and say human resources, human time, energy, and talents, that's a scarce resource, and it all has to be used well. How do we get it using well? Let the people decide for themselves how to use it. They know far better than the government. They know better than a boss how to use their time, energy, and talents well.
To get into this 1 planet living, we were kind of hoping that the COPs would deliver more than they have. And we've gone through a really bad spate of COPs where they've all been in authoritarian, sort of oil-producing, gas-producing countries. We're going to Brazil, which has just signed off a load of oil drilling licenses in the entrance to the Amazon. You talk a little bit about this in the book in terms of one thing that I've noticed when going to quite a few COPs is this coalition of vulnerable nations that are able to develop voices by coming together. And I think there's something we can all learn from that, in terms, especially Britain in its post-Europe phase. How do you feel about COP30 in terms of potential? There's a lot of noise about America stepping back, but China's stepping up. What do you feel about COP30 in terms of good, bad, ugly, etc.?
This is something that again runs right through the book. Politics is a process, not an event. And so one single, I think in the past there's been, we do this one thing and we have this one decision and then we fix things. And that's just not how the world or politics or society or geopolitics works. You're in a continual process of change, of evolution, of development. And there are lots of positive things happening. The crucial thing here, the top level, has to be focusing on fossil fuels and stopping burning fossil fuels. And in terms of the UK context, that's one of the key asks. The Green MPs wrote to Sir Keir Starmer before he set off for COP, very much focused on that, but also focused on the idea of a just transition. And Carla Denyer, the Green Party MP that has a private members bill, focused on how do we get the jobs so that people who work in high carbon jobs now can transition, have the time and the space and the support, something like a furlough scheme, to shift over to low carbon they've got a lot of the skills they need. They just need a little bit of help to shift over into the new industries. So I think what's going to happen at COP is we will all be both excited and disappointed, as we are at every COP. But focusing on what you were saying about leadership particularly, I mean, this is one of my pet things, is in previous COPs we've seen, for example, Barbados, in geopolitical military terms, a nation of no global significance whatsoever, but has been an absolute leader. We've seen the small island states be an absolute leader. A COP that's happening before this COP is actually the Minamata Treaty COP, which is about mercury pollution. And African states who are being affected by mercury pollution from gold mining are actually the global leaders. I'm afraid Britain is trailing far behind and is one of the very few countries saying, oh, we're going too fast, we need to go slower, which is very disappointing. But nonetheless, the leadership here is coming from small African states who have a real issue. There's a lot of negative stuff said about the idea of a multipolar world. But again, this is using the resources, the skills, the knowledge of all sorts of different countries with their different issues, bringing them all together. And my position in terms of Britain is we have to stop marching into the room going, right, we're here and we'll fix things. What we need to do instead is say, okay, we're here to support you. What are you trying to achieve? How can we assist with that? We've got resources. We're a wealthy country. We have the English language, which you're probably all speaking in. How can we help you and support you and take things in the direction you want to go? And that learning is absolutely crucial.
At the same time, we're living now in this era of real-time climate impacts. I saw this huge typhoon hit the Philippines yesterday. You can look anywhere, basically, and there are catastrophic events at every turn. Is that making it harder for us to implement these kinds of green political philosophy, or is it an opportunity for us to do it? Because in some respects, we can become so obsessed with our own potential problems that we don't recognize what's going on around the world.
In terms of the UK context, we are, of course, seeing this as well. Floods, droughts, farmers have just had the most awful year, and food security is an issue I've long been talking about, and I talk about quite a lot in the book Change Everything, about how we need to think about our own security. So this is not just something that's happening over there, but it is something that the reality around the world is most of the people being worst hit, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Jamaica, have done almost nothing to contribute to the climate emergency, yet they're the people who are suffering. Bangladesh is the other obvious, very clear example, Pakistan as well. And so we have responsibility to support and help. But the fact is, people are going to have to rebuild. And in another context, I was recently in Ukraine and I gave a speech in the House talking about how Ukraine, under the most difficult conceivable circumstances, is actually looking to build back better, is showing real climate leadership, even under the difficult circumstances that they're trying to run a country in under regular missile attack. And so resilience, adaptation, these are things that actually make things better for people as well as make better for the planet. One of the crucial things is to make sure we build back better, both in terms of adapting so people have safe, secure places to live that aren't going to be flooded out, that the roof's not going to be blown away, whatever you need to do. But we also can give people a better life while we're doing that. What we're doing now is really not working out very well. That's why the message that change is going to happen is a really positive message.
Really, just to end on Change Everything, it is a sort of textbook for change and ideas and so on. How would you suggest people get involved with those ideas? What's the role for every sort of citizen picking up the book?
First of all, textbook makes it sound a bit dry, and I want to stress that I don't think it is dry. There's 12 chapters. Word tells me it takes you 20 minutes to read a chapter. And it is very much a call to action. I say, at the start of the introduction, you don't necessarily have to sit down and read all of this book. Grab a bit that really, really floats your boat and go off and go out and do something. So it is very much a call for everyone to make politics what they do not have done to them, and a demonstration that once people do something, and one of the things that I record in the book is this essentially reflects what I've been saying at public meetings over a dozen years. Quite a few of the voices in the book are actually other people at those meetings, things they've said to me. So even just talking to your classmates, your friends, your colleagues, your family, and saying, hey, I read this really interesting idea. What do you think about this? And how could we do that? And how could we make our street nicer? How could we get some nice wildflowers growing in spring? Whatever you can do, whatever possibility action you can take, all of these are cumulatively. Change doesn't happen slowly and gradually. Change happens in big jumps. The last real political change in Britain was the election of Margaret Thatcher. Blair was the child of Thatcher. Cameron was the child of Blair. Don't quite know what Boris Johnson was. We'll park that one. But Sir Keir Starmer is very clearly the child of Blair. We're ready for the new age, and the wave is building, and you can be part of that wave, making it bigger and making sure it's going in the right direction. So make politics what you do. That's the top line message.
Thank you very much. It's been great to speak to you.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our discussion.
If you are concerned about the future, then why not travel with me through every COP conference from COP21 in Paris to COP28 in Dubai by ordering my book COP Out: How Governments Have Failed the People on Climate. In COP Out you'll gain insights into what is actually going on in these supposed world-saving conferences and how we have ended up in this dire era of dangerous consequences. You can order COP Out via the link in the notes or on any online bookstore worldwide, in paperback or audio version.